Hi, gorgeous girl. So a lot of people over the years have told me that I don't look very French, which I completely get. While sitting here in the sun in my stripy t-shirt, drinking coffee from a mug that says "Encore 5 minutes." If I don't look French now, I don't know what to do. I'm sitting here working on my Miles tee just because I'm procrastinating working on the project that I wanted to make a project vlog of, because I haven't filmed any segments yet at all, and I really need to show you this next bit before I work on it anymore. So I wanted to film a project vlog for my GANNI vest, which, as you can see, is well underway. A little bit too much underway, actually, I think. So I kind of got a bit carried away. I didn't really film anything whilst I was knitting it, because I was actually just really enjoying knitting it, and the weather really wasn't at a point where I could film outdoors like this. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of document the process of making this. So this is the vest number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I've converted to be seamed and bottom up, which are, like most knitters, 2 worst nightmares, but I willingly did this to myself. I converted them that way because I wanted to make an Intarsia argyle knit vest in the style of this GANNI one. I've talked about it in a couple of previous videos, so you may have already heard me talk about this in my attempt to show more instances of designer duping. Yeah, I thought I'd bring you along with me on my thought process on this one. So first of all, I think the last time that I left off, I'd started off with this bottom rib, which is where I started. I started bottom up because I wanted to establish the argyle pattern before I had to do any of the shaping at the top, which caused some problems, which I'll get into in a minute. But yeah, I had started with the bottom rib, and I'd done like a whopping, like, I think this is like 15 centimeters of bottom rib, because in the inspo image the rib looks quite long. I just couldn't resist. I kind of wanted to get established before I started this video, but then I just got really carried away and kept knitting. So here we go. I started with my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 colors at the bottom at the beginning of the rib. I switched from, I think I was on a 3.5mm needle, and I switched to a 4.5 to do the main body. The vest number 1 is a DK weight, and I thought a DK was good for the sort of yarns that I was using. The yarns that I had, the grey is a woolly knit cone in the colour steel grey, held double. And then all of the other colours are either DK weights or fingering weights held double. So the red is also a woolly knit cone held double. The yellow is lemon pie soft tweed by Drops. The navy is Drops Lima. The brown is Drops Nord. What else? The light blue is Drops Alpaca held double. But the problem that I was having was that I didn't have a colour that was this sort of colour, this sort of warm mauvey purple, which is what I needed to sort of complete out the colour palette. And this is the BC Garn Samia, which is great, and I was hoping to hold it single, but it's a light DK. It's less of a, it's just not quite plump enough to go with the other colors, especially since I'm holding fingering weights double, and sometimes they're quite big fingering weights, so they, you know, really plump out the fabric. And I also really wanted quite a dense fabric as well for this, because I feel like that would translate the color work really well. Started off holding it single, realized that the fabric felt really light, and then switched to holding it double without frogging. If you know anything about me, you know that I will do a whole lot of work to not have to do more work. Literally, case in point, I'm knitting another jumper at the moment, and I forgot to do 2 rounds of, I think it was like 2 rounds of purl stitches before you start the sleeves, so it creates this like delineation, and instead of, I'd only like done like maybe 10-12 centimeters of the sleeve when I realized, and instead of doing that, I finished the sleeve 2 rows early, cut the sleeve off, picked it up on needles, picked up the sleeve again, did the purl rows, and then Kitchener stitched it back on instead of just frogging and starting the sleeve again. I have the purple held single, and then it kind of goes into being held double. I think what I will do is I will duplicate stitch the part where I've held it single, which is quite a bit, like it's, just do it by feel, it's about that much, and I will duplicate stitch that to make it as thick as the other way, and I think that's kind of essentially the same as holding a double. I don't know, I think it'll work, it should be fine. And then another thing that I messed up, I'd gotten all the way to binding off the stitches in the middle for the neck, and I've even done one whole shoulder, which is a bit long, when I realized that I'm basically only gonna have one big diamond in the middle, and that's not really the look of the GANNI sweater vest, and that the main parts that will be visible are all of these grey parts, which is also what the neck will be done in, the rib in the neck. So at this point I was kind of like, I don't know, do I just abandon the project, do I start again? It also annoyed me when I was looking at inspo images for the GANNI vest, that it was recently really on sale, and it's only like, I don't know, like £150, which these materials didn't cost that. My time would have definitely cost that. It probably would have been a lot easier for me to just buy the goddamn vest instead of make it, but it's not the point. It's not why we're here. So anyway, I think what I have surmised is that I have actually made it too short. I was too keen to bind off, because it will be pulled this way when seaming, which will make it shorter, and also if I hold it up like this, it falls at like this length, which is nice for like a cropped length, but I think I actually want it kind of oversized so I can sort of half tuck it if I need to. So I think what I'm going to do is that I'm going to frog some of this, which is why I wanted to stop at this point, so that I could show you it before I frogged it. I want to frog everything. It's not actually that much frogging, so I'm gonna frog to just below where I bound off, and then keep knitting for a while longer. I want to say, I think I'm gonna have this further actually down like this, and so then I'll have another 10 centimeters ish to do before I start binding off for the neck again. And basically all I'm trying to do is to just get the black around. I want to establish the black triangle so that it comes up around the because I was almost at the point with this light blue triangle at the point to sort of change to the black. I just want the black to sort of hit the neck so that it's not just one big bit of grey around the neck. That will make the armhole really long, which I'm not against, because we're going to do rib, so it's going to bring the armhole in a bit. That's a spider, go away. And I also wanted quite a large armhole. I think the vest number 1 is quite short. The armhole, the arm size, quite short, and I think for something that I intend to wear over things like shirts, oversized shirts, I think the bigger the armhole, the better. This is just the first panel, so I have all of this fun to repeat on the other panel, but it is working out quite quickly. It's also really quite enjoyable once you get into the swing of things. I never knew this about Intarsia, right? But so you have all of your balls laid out, and what I was doing when I was changing colors and swapping the thing is that I was moving the ball of yarn each time to stop it from getting tangled. But I found that if you're just like sort of knitting, this is the back, but like if you're knitting the front, and then when you switch and you go back the other way and then you twist the yarn back the other way, then you don't actually have to move the balls of yarn at all, because you're basically reversing what you just did. And so you don't actually have to touch the balls of yarn. I don't know if everyone knew this, and this was a commonly known thing, but I taught myself how to do Intarsia, so maybe if I had watched any resources at all, then I would have found out that this is actually the proper way to do things. But yeah, it is quite relaxing. I am going to frog this, put it back on the needles. I'm just going to do the honours now and just take this off the needles because I know I won't be needing it. Oh yeah, and then whilst I'm doing that, I'm probably going to try and read my book at the same time. I just finished The Shining, which was good. I didn't realise how much it differed from the film. I had no clue. I've now since learned that King isn't actually a fan of like Kubrick's version, but yeah, I was really expecting there to be something about, you know, making Jack a dull boy, all work and no play, and like, you know, a river of blood and all of these twins things, and none of that was in the book. But it was good. It followed a lot of what I'd say like are like King tropes. Like when I read Pet Sematary, that like building tension at the end of the novel where someone is racing from one end of the country to another and trying to book flights last minute is like pretty much mirrored from Pet Sematary to here. And yeah, I felt like it felt a bit repetitive, maybe because I also read Pet Sematary this year. And yeah, I also didn't really find it that frightening, which is disappointing because I'd like to be scared by a book at some point. But no, I didn't really find it that scary. So I'm going to move on to my final book that I brought with me, which is Cool, which is the first book in the Silo series, Wool. It's not called the Silo series. It's only called that because the TV show is called Silo, which I think is good timing because they announced the return of Silo season 2. So yeah, I'm going to start that book today, and I'll let you know how I get on. See this, hang on. That is Cami stalking everyone that lives on the other side of the fence. She is obsessed with them, and she's taking a break there, but most of the time she's just like running back and forth in front of the hedge trying to sort of, she doesn't bark, she doesn't do anything, she's just watching. Oh, there she goes again. It's been my dog this entire trip, just head in a bush. Okay, I'm gonna leave this here. Okay, so it is a few days later, I think, since I last updated you on progress on my GANNI vest. So yeah, I just wanted to check in. This is where we are at. We have Ooh, it looks good on camera. We have a full panel, so that was completed. That is good. I'm happy with this. I'm a little bit concerned it's too long. I don't know, to be seen. Anyway, since then I did cast on for the ribbing again for the front panel. I just wanted to explain a bit about like how I do my tubular cast on as well. So I think I mentioned last time, like I'm not really good at it, and I'm definitely not, but I've learned the finger movement of like, so like with the tubular cast on, you have it you have your two pieces, and then you have your two needles, and then you're kind of like going over and then going under. Actually, there's plenty of videos explaining how to do this. But the thing I really struggle with tubular cast on is A, counting stitches and like trying to figure out how many stitches I have on the needle. And then B, oh yeah, like figuring out whether it's like a knit or a purl without actually knitting it. Because usually with a tubular cast on, you know which one you're starting with. Either you start with a knit or you start with a purl, and then you go from there and you go knit, purl, knit, purl. And yeah, I can never visually like figure that out. So my solution is that I just cast on way too many stitches. So I'll just do like a tubular cast on for ages. I'll do the motion for ages until I think I have more than enough. So here I was casting on 100. So I did it until it looked like I had way more than 100. And then from there I just kind of start knitting. So I start integrating the knit and the purl, because when you start knitting you can really start to tell like which one's a knit and which one is a purl. And then when I got to the end, I had too many stitches and I was able to count them when they were on my needle. And then I just kind of just like took the rest of the stitches that were surplus off the needle, and then now I have this tail. This one is a lot neater and I think it looks really good, so I'm happy with that one. The only difference is that I actually shifted the pattern over a bit so that I have a much bigger red block. Yet to be seen as well if that was a good choice. I think it could look quite intentional, or it could look like a mistake and like the things badly aligned. It will also mean that on the back panel, like on the front panel, these are pretty symmetrical, but then on this back panel it'll be like slightly off. This is our last day here in the place that we rented, and our last day in this region before we drive back. We start our journey back to Ireland. So tomorrow morning we're heading off in the car. Yeah, so I'm really keen to get this done. I'm hoping to be able to work on it whilst I'm in the car. The main reason I'm keen to do so is because I really want to film like a autumn plans video. I have so many ideas. I'm really hyped for like winter patterns now that it's like end of October and like it's really hot here but it's really cold at home. Like I'm really craving some knitwear, and I'm kind of just done with it being hot now. But yeah, I want to do that as soon as I get back. So I want to get this video posted so that I can get the next video posted before it's like basically not autumn anymore. We're already borderline. So yeah. What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, I'm trying to hurry up because the sun is going down. Yeah, the final thing I wanted to talk about was the method that I use for charting like all sorts of colorwork projects and like anything that involves a chart. I think a lot of people use stitch fiddle, and I think that's probably also a really good way to do it. I'm just like a die-hard spreadsheet person. I get that from my dad, who is also a die-hard Excel user, but in my own millennial way I'm massively a sheets user, and simply all I do is that I just start with a new sheet, click the cell in the corner, and then so that selects everything, and then make all of the boxes, so like all of the rows and the columns, to be a lot smaller and to also be a square, because I feel like that really helps me visualize in a like chart format rather than a, you know, classic like long cell format. And then I just use the color function if I'm doing color work. But the only issue I find with that in Sheets, I'm not sure if it does it in Excel, I can't remember, but in Sheets you can't like select the number of like cells and get the count in the bottom right corner unless you put a value in it. So if it's just like the color that's highlighted, you don't really get, you can't like just be like, oh, I put this amount of color here, how many, you know, how many stitches is that, how many like cells is that. So what I generally do is I just put like a dot or a, yeah, like a dot, like a full stop, yeah, in each cell. And then I also add the color, and then when I'm sort of adding large blocks of color, I would just copy paste large blocks of color, and that way, you know, if I'm working the pattern and I'm referring to my sheets thing, I can, instead of having to manually count how many cells there are, I can just select them and it says, you know, like the sum is 17 or whatever. And then this is what I did for this chart, and I only did the beginning of it because for Argyle that's kind of all you need. So, you know, I had my 100 stitches to start with, and then I like visually tried to block out like how many, you know, roughly how many stitches I would need for each half triangle. I actually started further up at like the full triangles and tried to fit as many as I could compared to the reference image in the 100 cells that I had, and then from there I like did the like ladder down to figure out how many stitches I need to start with. And then, as I said before, it's kind of just each row you're either increasing or decreasing one of your blocks, and in this instance I'm, you know, increasing or decreasing on the knit row, and then I'm just knitting it normally on the purl row. So that is how I do that, if you're curious. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. It's definitely not rocket science, but hopefully this helped maybe one person. It's really getting dark now, so I'm going to cut this off. Okay, bye. Since I last spoke to you, oh my god. This is where we're at. Looks great now. Had many existential crises in between now when I'm speaking to you and the previous time that I spoke to you. Since then, knit the entire back panel, played multiple games of Yarn Chicken. For the blue color, I only brought whatever I wound up of like the ball that I had left. I think I do have another ball of this. I think the last bit of it that I did was this triangle at the back. No, I think I would in the end that I had left was like this much. It was absolutely tiny. So played Yarn Chicken with that. And then also for this BC Garn Samia, which I was previously holding single, and then went to holding double. I then when it came to this panel at the top, I started off holding it single because I was playing Yarn Chicken and was thinking I could go back and duplicate stitch it like the other part later. Then I was like, oh, I kind of have a lot of yarn here. I could probably figure this out. Went back to holding it double and then quickly realized that I wasn't going to have enough and went back to holding it single. So yeah, I completely ran out of that yarn. I also... just to finish off the shoulder, I started, because I was like literally going to run out before I reached the end of the section that I was knitting. I started trying to split splice it with other ends that I was like borrowing, you know, my tails from like the rest of the triangles. I was like taking off, you know, like tiny little pieces and trying to split splice it. Which was going okay until I realized this later when I was trying to order another ball of it. It's superwash, so so split splicing isn't going to work. I'm sure you all know, but for those of you who don't know, split splicing is when you sort of felt the fibers together. So you take like one end of yarn, another end of yarn. You can sort of separate the plies, break off a bit of one ply, break off the other ply, and then split splice them together, and then it's less bulky. Sometimes I don't bother. Yeah, that only really works with yarns that are feltable, and something that's superwash is not feltable by the fact that it's superwash. So it was kind of, they were sticking together, but then I was kind of knitting with them later on and they were just breaking off. So then I started tying knots. It was a whole thing. I'm gonna fix this monstrosity with duplicate stitch later on when I get another ball of yarn, which I'll talk about in a minute. Finish the back panel whilst driving. So I didn't mention in my last bit of the video, but we were having some car trouble before we left. Our car started clicking in a really horrendous way. It started doing it about a week before we were due to leave. It was when you were sort of accelerating into a turn, wasn't it, when it was starting to click. And then my partner was like Googling this and he was like, oh, that looks like it's like the CV joint. Everything that I've researched points towards it being the CV joint. Yeah, anyway, the CV joint, bad news. Long story short, it wasn't the CV joint, it was the motor bracket, motor joint. Oh, it's moteur in French. The engine, it was like the engine bracket was touching against the engine and it was clicking when we were driving. And they were like, okay, you need to replace it, but we can't replace it before you leave. But it's not dangerous to drive on for the distance that you're about to do, which is like 1,700 kilometers. And they were like, you'll probably be fine. You need to fix your back tire. You need to replace that, but you'll probably be fine. And like, we give you the okay to go drive on it. And they like moved it out of the way so that it wasn't clicking. But then as soon as we started driving again, it started clicking again in a different way. Anyway, so this was just a very like stressful experience when you're like driving a really long distance. You have to make it there because otherwise you can't catch the ferry. We had a flexi fare on the ferry, but because we booked pet cabins, I didn't know if I was able to sort of change that to a date that was close enough and there'd still be cabins available. There was a lot of unknowns. And then, yeah, so on that trip, on the drive up, I started knitting on the back panel, to be honest. It was nice to have something engaging to work on when you're the passenger. I think I may have gotten bored if I was just doing stockinette. Is she in shot doing this? This dog, I swear to God. Wait, hang on. Yikes. Mentalist of a dog. Yeah, so I was working on the back panel in the car. I finished the back panel. I finished it, I think, before we got to the ferry. And then, I was still seaming in the car. So I started seaming it in the car. This is relevant. I'll explain why it's relevant. I used mattress stitch, which is, I'm going to say my favorite style of seaming, but it's basically the only one I've ever used. But once you learn how to do mattress stitch, it's like life-changing. Like, I think it's really, really easy once you get the hang of it and you learn how to do it. The pattern I learned how to do it on was, I talk about it all the time, the Rose Knitwear Aura top is a seamed garment. I think you can convert it to do it in the round, but I did, the first time I knit it, I just did it all flat. And I was seaming it on mohair, like one strand of mohair. And you, like, also when you were weaving in the ends, like, you couldn't really hide them because it was transparent. So like, it was like a lot of like really detailed work, and you're setting in a sleeve. So you're doing mattress stitch vertically, and then you're translating that to horizontally when you get to the top of the sleeve and the bottom of it. So great pattern for learning mattress stitch, because like you really, really get the hang of it. But yeah, so I love mattress stitch. At this point, I started noticing two problems: that I had done not enough decreases at the shoulder on the front panel. I'd kind of just skipped a section of the pattern. It kind of goes like decrease every other row, and then there's another section where it's like decrease every fourth row, and I just skipped that one. And so I was like 3 stitches off. I was already kind of getting concerned that it was looking kind of big. If you were watching my previous clip and you were like screaming at the camera being like, it looks way too big, you'd be right. I was like, okay, no, that's fine. I'll just do it correctly on the back panel and then pick up more stitches when I go to do the ribbing on the side. Which was like one issue. And then the other issue is that, as I suspected, the side seams, the sort of, what are they called, the arm side, it was just very, very deep. I thought I could correct that with some trickery with the ribbing later on. And then the last problem was that it was just way too big. So I think you may have seen some try-on clips in the boat. That was the first time I was able to try it on, because that was the point where I'd actually seamed it, and then I was in a place where I could like stand up and look in a mirror. It was massive. Like, it was, and this is like pre-blocking. I did a size up on the vest number 1 because my first vest number 1 was really quite small and I didn't like the fit of it. I think my gauge is probably completely off. And I think maybe my tension is very different now than when I first started knitting. And I did a gauge swatch and it looked okay. I just think I just overcompensated way too much. So it was looking massive. I got really emo about it for a while. Like, on the boat, I was just like, I'm just gonna frog the whole thing. Like, it's not working. I wasn't happy with the way that the colors were lining up. I think I mentioned that last time, that I didn't get enough of the visual impact of the colors. And I was like, okay, I could take in some stitches at the side seam, but then I'd start losing all of the beautiful, like the yellow and the red, which really gives it like the punch. All of these colors are kind of boring, but like these are the ones that give it the punch. And I was just like, you know, like, it's just, there's too much wrong with it at this point. Slept on it, thought about it. I went ahead and seamed the sides again. So I didn't unpick it. I just kind of seamed it further in. And I took it in by about, what was it? 2 stitches on each panel on each side. So 4 stitches overall, 4 stitches on each side, and then 8 stitches overall, which took it in a bit, but not a lot. But it resolved some of the issues. I still had quite a deep arm size. So then when I was picking up stitches for the arm size, I did it on a rate of 2 out of 3 stitches, which I think was actually specified in the pattern, but I just made sure to do it sort of as tight as possible. I did mess up again where I started picking it up with my 4.5mm needles instead of like the ribbing gauge ones. And I did it on one side. I didn't want to undo it, so I did the same on the other side. I did 1 round in 4.5s and then switched. And then, so it was already cinching it in quite a bit, which was good. I then decided to do some short rows in ribbing, just to sort of like make up the difference, like try and sort of elongate this bit under the arm so it was just less short. I overcompensated at first. I did too many short rows. So I like, you know, like at the what's it called, the beginning around here, I kind of went up a little bit. I did a couple of stitches, and I did that. I did like 2 sets of short rows, and then I did a third one, and that third one was way too big. It was like making it really, really thick. So I was like, okay, again, I don't want to rip back. So I just did the inverse short rows. So, you know, I knit to the point where I'd knit to, and then I did a short row on the top. So I was essentially just like evening out the number of rows. If that makes any sense. And then I just omitted that on the other side when I picked up these. And at that point, it was starting to look better. Oh, and then bearing in mind that I'm also, when I'm picking up for the ribbing, I'm like cutting out like 3 stitches on the front panel, because it was longer on my front panel than it was on my back panel, because I didn't do the decreases that I mentioned earlier. So lots of like jiggery pokery with this thing. I'm like, it's just butchered. Like there's so much going on. I probably should have just frogged the whole thing and started again, but I was excited. I wanted to get this pattern out, this video out. And then another thing I really hated on the boat is that I'd started picking up the neck in the grey colour, and because I'd frogged so I could get the black to break up the grey at the top, and then I started picking up with the grey colour, and it just looked like really crap. Like I really didn't like it. So I was like, oh, I hate that too. And I was really at the point where I was binding off the collar, and I had to frog that as well. And I started again in the black, and I think that was really, really successful. The state that we're in now is that I need to do the duplicate stitch of these lines in the argyle. And then I also need to duplicate stitch all of the purple bits that are held single. I was gonna order yarn from the place that I got it from originally, but the shipping was like €6.50, and I thought like that's like almost the cost of a ball. So I was like, oh, I'm going to Copenhagen in like a week and a half. Found out that BC Garn is a Danish company. I was like, perfect, I'll just pick it up in Copenhagen. Did more research. Turns out it's actually kind of hard to find places like yarn stores that stock BC Garn, that specific line. In Copenhagen itself, I think you can order online pretty easily. There are other shops in Denmark that you can get it at, but I wasn't 100% sure that I was actually going to be able to get it in Copenhagen, and we're only in Copenhagen for 5 days. I didn't want to trek. I didn't want to put extra pressure on myself to just get this one ball of yarn. I wanted to instead try and look for Hillsvåg, again, I'll get into this later. So I was like, oh, I'll just get it then. And then I was like, okay, but then basically I have to wait until we're back from Copenhagen to finish this. So that would be November like 12th. Which was annoying. I have now come around so much on this where I'm like, oh, I really want to wear it in Copenhagen. So I'm like, okay, I'd actually like to get it done before. Luckily, my partner is going into Dublin tomorrow to drop the car to get repaired, and then also to go into the office. So he will be in Dublin and he will be able to pick up a ball of yarn. As long as they have it, because I was like, oh, I'll make up the order and then I'll try and get to free shipping, but you can only get free shipping after like 80 euros. And I was like, I don't want to spend buy 80 euros worth of yarn 2 days before going to Copenhagen. And I was like, oh, they also sell it on hobby.com. I've never ordered from Hobby before. And then I'm like, okay, but their shipping is like $7.99, and then you can, and like, it was just like a whole thing. I was getting in my head about it. I've got the duplicate stitching left to do. That in itself hasn't been fun. I was doing that this morning. So the thing that makes this annoying is that I've discovered that when you have a grid pattern, if it was the same length, the rows and the stitches, if they were the same measurements, then it would be pretty easy to do a diagonal line across a triangle. As it so happens, your row gauge is shorter than your stitch gauge, or at least it is mine in this case. And so if you try and do a straight diagonal where you like go like up two across one, up two across one, or something like that, then it would either end up like that or like that. And it wouldn't hit the straight point of the diagonal of the triangle. So I've been doing like combination, so like up, or like, yeah, across one, up two, and then across one, up three, and then across one, up two, and then like trying to alternate it. But then what's really frustrating is that it works some of the time, also because your middle point of the triangle often isn't one row. It could be like 2 rows or between 2 rows. It's a mess. It's hard to do. I've had to unpick it so many times. I've just done the yellow, and I have the red left to do on this panel, and then the yellow and the red on the other panel. I hope any of this is making sense. I'm just praying that blocking doesn't make it way too big, because after I've done the seaming, it's oversized, but it's not insane as it was before. I think if it blocks out and it really stretches, it could again lean into like way too oversized again. So yeah, I'm just praying. I'm gonna try and like smush it together when it's like lying on whatever it's drying on, and like smush it together and make sure it doesn't stretch out too much. But yeah, I can only control so much of that. So that is the recap of this horrendously complicated project that was supposed to be really easy. I was like, it's a vest, it'll take 5 minutes. It did not. Another reason why I'm happy that I'm done with the knitting is that I'd really like to take a break now from knitting. I've been knitting quite a bit whilst I've been away, especially at those like days in the car. I realized like that first day that we traveled, that was like it was like 10 hours of driving, and pretty much the entire time I was driving I was knitting. So I have this like little bone, well, no, we all have a bone, but like underneath this finger, my ring finger on the other hand, I have like, it's like a cartilage buildup, I think what it is, just from like friction, and it was really starting to be sore yesterday and like on the last day when I was on the boat and stuff like that. So I think it's from like, I was trying to like watch myself and I was knitting and see what I was doing with this finger that was creating that ball there, but I really do think it's just from like the claw of like the way I'm holding the work whilst I'm knitting. I knit English style, which I don't know, is it more or less ergonomic? I'm not sure. I think it's worse when I purl, and there's been a lot of purling with this because it's all been flat. A lot of the other things that I've been knitting as well have had quite a bit of purling in it, so I think it's time for me to take a break. I don't see a lot of creators talk about like hand health and pain. They mention it, but I don't think I often see like the real impact of it on people's knitting. And I think like I just really worry about like how my hands are gonna, you know, be into old age and into, you know, like my future. I try and do as many exercises as I can. I do also like do a lot of yoga or like things where I use my hands quite a bit on top of the knitting. So yeah, it's a worry of mine. So for the next couple of days, I'm not gonna knit. I'm done all of the knitting in this project. Duplicate stitch is not knitting, it's not the same movement. So I think that will be okay. Also to note, this room looks super empty. When we went away, we took the opportunity to get our floors done. We came back on Saturday. It's bank holiday Monday today. We've moved some essentials back in, but like there's a lot left to do. So it looks kind of funky. Looks kind of funky. I did a lot of the ends weaving in last night whilst watching Alien Romulus. It was good. It was okay. I saw a lot of discourse online about how like the most of it wasn't scary, but then the last 10 minutes were like had everyone in a chokehold, and it was like you're on the edge of your seat and like, oh my god, it's so scary. And it was like, ooh, wow, ugh. But it wasn't. Also, like anyone who says like online discourse just sounds like such a wanker, do you think? Oh my god. Online discourse. Yeah, I get it. It was like whoa, a surprise, and then quite visceral without getting into spoilers too much. But I think like, I don't know, if you've seen any of the other Alien movies, which to be completely fair to everyone, I only watched like really recently the original 3 Alien movies. But if you watched any of those, like it's pretty much a trope at this point that like everyone thinks they're safe and they're like in the ship and they're getting into the cryo chamber and like everything's fine, and then like in the last 10 minutes the xenomorph comes out of nowhere and like messes shit up. So like it wasn't that terrifying to me, that last sequence, because I was expecting it. I also unfortunately did see the screenshot of the actor that plays in the last scene, or in the last scenes, and like I saw people talking about that and like how he was cast, and how it was like all practical effects, which was cool, but it kind of ruined the last bit of the movie. But yay for gore. Such a weird intersection of interests if you're watching and you're like really into this chat about it's essentially a horror movie, and then also intense rants about Argyle knitting, then you're a bit of me, I guess. And if you're suffering through it, just to get to the conclusion, thank you so much. I'm gonna go and try and enjoy the rest of my bank holiday weekend. Back to work tomorrow. Oh yeah, sorry, Copenhagen. I cannot be blamed for the fact that like it's gonna basically be a yarn knitting tour, because he requested to go to Copenhagen and it just so happens that there's lots of Danish yarn there. But yeah, I am researching quite intensely right now the things that I want to buy whilst I'm there. I think I'd previously said that I was on a yarn ban. I am making an exception for Copenhagen. I also bought quite a lot of yarn in France, so sue me. But I would love some Fjeholt, the yarn that Petite Knit uses in a lot of her patterns that Tiffany Lou also picked up when she was in Copenhagen. I am really wanting to pick up some of that. It's quite expensive, so I think I will only get maybe one sweater's quantity in the Pelsult. There's the 8.2 and then there's the 5.52, which I think is the DK, and then the 8.2 is like the fingering weight. I'm kind of more tempted by the fingering weight, but the fingering weight's quite expensive. Like it's like €18 per skein, which is a lot for like a non-hand-dyed skein. Anyway, I want to pick up some of that. I want to get some Sister Yet. I said in a previous video that I really wanted the Sister Yet silk mohair. Okay, we're back again for the third time. What was I saying? I'm hoping to get some Sister Yet in the silk mohair. I would like to get, I don't think I'm going to be able to, but I'd love to try some Hillsvåg unspun like every other knitfluencer. I really would love to try some, but I don't think that they do the plates that often in yarn stores that like aren't Norwegian or like close to the mill. I think I'd seen a lot of Inga from Knitting Traditions, like she usually goes to the mill to get the plates rather than I think like it's mostly like their hanks and stuff that you can get in more commercial yarn stores. If I can get Hillsvåg at all, I think it's a bit more niche. I think there's one yarn store that may do it, so I'm hoping that they will have some. I want to get some Peer Gynt. I don't even think it's any cheaper in Denmark, but I will just be somewhere that sells Peer Gynt because I have a gift knit that I want to do at Christmas. If they do have BC Garn, I'm really interested in trying some Loch Lomond. But I'd like to see the colours in person before I purchase any of that. This is becoming a lot already. Hopefully the next thing that you'll see is the reveal. I just want to quickly shout out these socks that I bought that I thought they're men's socks, but they'll be fine. That I thought were very appropriate. And yeah, I'm gonna go make some lunch and maybe work on some more of the duplicate stitching. I'm gonna make, my partner's out right now, I'm gonna make the lunch that I always make when he's not around. He doesn't like eating too much cheese, and I am made up of 60% cheese, so I'm gonna go make that. And yeah, just hopefully have a chill bank holiday.